Hello YouTube and welcome to my next video. Today we're taking a look into my AROMAGE deck profile. First of all, quick explanation about the AROMAGE Gimmicks. Every AROMAGE monster has two effects. The first is based on the LP difference between both players, and the second when you gain LP yourself. If you have higher LP than your opponent, then they have some sort of permanent effect. When you gain LP instead, they have a pretty good trigger effect. You always have to keep in mind that those trigger effects always activate even if you have no valid target, since they are mandatory. The strategy with AROMAGE is that you always want to have higher LP than your opponent to get a perfect use out of your effects. Going straight into the deck profile and starting off with one copy of AROMAGE Bergamot. This one is the biggest monster the Aroma archetype can deliver. When you have more LP than your opponent, your plant monsters get the effect to deal piercing damage. His trigger effect allows him to gain 1000 attack and defense when you gain LP. So he's most likely a 3400 beatstick, and having the field spell Aroma Garden around easily climbs up to 3900 attack points. So use this guy if you want to hit really hard. Next we have one copy of Fairy Archer Enguna. She is played because of the possibility to trigger its effect quite easily with the effect of Lone Fire Blossom, which will get mentioned later, or the link to Aromaseraphine Jasmine. Its effect allows you, when special summoned from an effect of a plant monster, to special summon one level 5 or higher plant monster from your graveyard, which can lead easily into a Link, Synchro or even Xyz. The effects of the special summon monster are negated to prevent even more abuse of this card. Then we have two copies of AROMAGE Majoram. She has the permanent effect when your LP are higher than the opponent's, you don't take any damage from attacks where plant monsters are involved. She also has a hand effect where she can special summon itself when a plant monster you control gets destroyed by battle, and if you do, you gain 500 LP after her summoning. That will lead into immediately trigger her effect, which says you can banish cards from your opponent's graveyard up to the number of AROMAGE monsters you control. So it's a possible banish for 1 up to 6 cards, which is kinda insane. This effect is pretty good to get rid of the graveyard setups and can deny a lot of decks from playing. Next we have my favorite out of all of them, 3 copies of Aromage Rosemary. A permanent effect prevents your opponent from using monster effect until the end of the damage step when a plant monster is attacking, which can give you quite the advantage, having an Archfiend Black Skull Dragon like effect on every plant monster you control. A trigger effect lets you target one monster on the field and change its battle position, which can be useful in a lot of circumstances. Then we have 2 copies of AROMAGE Kananga. A permanent effect lowers the attack and defense of every monster your opponent controls by 500. A trigger effect allows you to target one spell trap your opponent controls and bounce back to the hand, which isn't a pretty strong way to get rid of spell traps since they can be used or set the next turn again. That's also the reason why we are only playing 2 copies. Following with 3 copies of probably the best generic plant monster there is, Lone Fire Blossom. Its effect allows you to tribute one plant monster you control, including himself as well, to special summon one plant monster from your deck. So you can always go into the monster you currently need. You need a huge beatstick, go for Bergamot. You want to continue with plays, go for Enguna. You need draw power, go for Jasmine, which is coming up next. Then just like mentioned, we probably have the best monster of AROMAGE, 3 copies of AROMAGE Jasmine. A permanent effect allows you to once per turn perform another normal summon for a plant monster, which is pretty good in this deck since AROMAGE doesn't have a lot of special summon opportunities. The trigger effect lets you draw 1 card, which is the reason this card is probably the best out of all others, because drawing a card is always a good effect to have. Next we have one of the new AROMAGEs, 3 copies of AROMAGE Laurel. He's one of the few AROMAGEs which can actually special summon themselves. So if you have more LP than your opponent, you can special summon this card from your hand. The trigger effect allows you to target another plant monster or even himself and treat it as a tuner for this turn. If this card leaves the field, it doesn't matter how, you gain 500 LP. So if you use this card as Link or Synchro material, the upcoming extra deck monster can always activate the trigger effect immediately after summoned, because you gain the additional 500 LP later from Laurel. That's why this card is one of the best playmakers in AROMAGEs. Then we have some sort of hand trap. I mean, it doesn't interrupt the enemy as its own effect, but the effect could lead to interruption. We are talking about Aromaseraphine Angelica, the only Aromaseraphine monster in the main deck. Normally those are the extra deck versions, so I don't know why this one is meant to be a main deck monster, but I guess that doesn't matter. Its effect allows you to discard this card during either player's turn to target one AROMAGE monster in the graveyard and gain LP equal to its target's attack. So if you for example target Bergamot, that's like a 2400 heal for you. Afterwards, all AROMAGEs you control will trigger since you gain LP, which can lead into pretty good disruption depending on your board. The second effect is neat as well, where you can special summon this card from your graveyard when your LP are higher than the opponent's, but it gets banished afterwards. Otherwise this card would be too good actually. So this card gives you a pretty good heal for free and an opportunity to go into synchros afterwards since she's a tuner monster. Now we are finished with the monster section, heading over to the spells, where we start with 3 copies of the field spell Aroma Garden, which has the effect that once per turn you can gain 500 LP if you control an Aromage monster. All your monsters then gain 500 attack and defense, including the monsters which weren't even on the field when the effect was activated. It also has another effect: when a plant monster you control is destroyed by bell or card effect, you gain another 1000 LP. For free, because why not? So this card is pretty important because this archetype is all about gaining LP to use the effects, and being able to achieve that without having to use any resources is a pretty good way to do so. Coming with the good field spell, we also play 1 copy of Terraforming, since the Aroma Garden can't be searched out. Then we have the pretty decent permanent spell Aroma Gardening, which we play 3 copies of. 3 copies of permanent spells, which effect is once per turn, is always kinda risky, but it's definitely worth it. When you summon an Aromage monster, you can activate this effect to gain 1000 LP. You can choose when you want to activate this effect, so you can decide for which Aromage monster effect to apply for. The other effect is one of the few effects which can be activated when your LP are lower than your opponent's. So if your opponent declares an attack while you have lower LP, you get to special summon 1 Aromage monster from your deck, which will also trigger the other effect of this card immediately. So you get a free monster with the effect instantly activating. Then we play 2 copies of Child's Play. Another permanent spell, but this time it's not once per turn. So even if you drew both, you get to use both of these cards' effect. This card says when your opponent summons a monster, you get 300 LP. The synergy with Aromages is quite easy to understand, hopefully. So if your opponent summons a monster, you get to use your effect even in the opponent's turn, since you get the 300 LP for free. On top of that life gaining effect, once you reach 10,000 LP, your monsters cannot be destroyed by Bell, which is also a nice effect to have. Next we have the newly unlimited card Symbol of Heritage, which allows you to special summon 1 monster from your graveyard when you have 3 copies of that monster already in your graveyard. With Lonefire, this is quite easy to achieve. Just activate the effect of Lonefire to go into Lonefire to go into Lonefire, since it's no hard once per turn. You then can use the last Lonefire to get into something you need, like Jasmine and so on. Then you have met the activation requirement of Symbol of Heritage, where you can revive Lonefire to get another plant monster out of your deck. This card is not once per turn, just like Lonefire, so if it happens you have more copies in hand, that doesn't matter as well. We're also playing 1 copy of that card because we are always doing that. As the last spell card, we play another permanent spell card called Backup Squad. So this card allows you to draw 1 card for every 1000 damage you took. So if you got, for example, like 3000 damage from a direct attack from a Blue Eyes, for example, you get to draw 3 cards. Since you aim to get high LP in Aromage, you might get to draw a lot of cards due to this effect. Heading over to the traps, where we play 2 copies of Blast Winds. This card has 3 different effects to choose from. Either you can send 1 plant monster from your hand or face up from the field to the graveyard to gain 500 life points. This could be used, for example, if your monster is going to die anyways due to an effect, why not gain 500 LP instead? Or target 1 plant monster in your graveyard and shuffle it back into the deck to gain 500 LP. So you can recycle your resources and also gain 500 LP for free. There is nothing more I need to add, I guess. Or pay 1000 LP to special summon 1 Aroma monster from a graveyard, which is a pretty strong effect, and taking in consideration if Aroma Gardening is on the field, this effect is basically for free, since you gain 1000 LP afterwards due to Aroma Gardening. So the 1000 LP effect is probably the best one to choose from, but it depends on the situation which effect you actually need. Then we have 2 copies of probably the most expensive card in this deck, Dried Winds. I think this card goes for like 20 euros or something like that, so it's kinda expensive. Which allows you to target 1 face-up monster on the field and destroy it when you gain LP. The other effect allows you to pay a certain amount of life points, so your life points are the same as the opponent's afterwards. You then get to destroy every monster your opponent controls with attack points less than the amount of life points you paid. You need to control an Aroma monster and have at least a 3000 life points lead on the opponent to activate this effect. So if you have, for example, 4500 life points more than your opponent, you can activate this effect. But keep in mind, you always have to pay the whole difference. So you can't choose to only pay like 3000, you always would have to pay the 4500. And as the last main deck card, we play 1 copy of Humid Winds, which allows you to pay 1000 life points to search out an Aroma monster from your deck. If it happens you have less LP than your opponent, you can also gain 500 life points by this card. The reason why we play a search card only once is because this card can be easily searched out with the level 6 synchro, and you also have a lot of effects in general where you can draw or even search out cards from your deck. So this effect ain't that important. Another funny card to add to this deck would be a Mabi. She's currently only available in the OCG, so we still have to wait for it in the TCG, but she would allow you to activate this effect on the start of your main phase 1. You could reveal this card in your hand and both players receive 300 life points, which means you have a card in hand which trigger all of your effects every time it's your turn. So, done with the main deck, we are heading over to the extra deck, starting off with 2 copies of Aromaseraphy Jasmine. As mentioned, Aromaseraphies are the extra deck versions of the main deck monsters in terms of lore, so yeah, I still don't know why Angelica is a main deck monster, but every other Aromaseraphy is extra deck. This card allows you to add any plant monster from your deck if you gain life points. She also has the fact that you can once per turn tribute 1 plant monster 3 points to special summon 1 plant monster from your deck. So if you happen to, for example, have Symbol of Heritage in the hand but you lack the Lone Fire, you can also special summon Lone Fire with this effect. Or add it with the first effect. Adding the effect that all plant monsters she points to, and including herself, cannot be destroyed by battle if you have more life points than the opponent. So this Link 2 monster is loaded with a lot of different but really good effects, and it's always worth the effort to bring this card out. Then we play 3 copies of Aromaseraphy Rosemary. She allows you to target 1 face-up card your opponent controls and negate the effect until the end of the turn if you gain life points. The permanent effect buffs all your plant-type monsters for 500 attack and defense, almost like Aroma Garden. But Aroma Garden buffs every monster, not just plant-type monsters. So having this card and Aroma Garden out will lead to a 1000 attack and defense boost for all of your monsters, which is pretty heavy. Next we have the newest Aromaseraphy synchro monster, Aromaseraphy Sweet Mariram. She's actually quite insane. When she's synchro summoned, you get to search out one of your winds strip. So humid winds, tried winds, or blessed winds, it doesn't matter. If you gain life points, you get to target 1 card and destroy it, which is pretty good. Adding the permanent effect where your opponent cannot target plant monsters you control with card effects while you have more life points. So she searches out one of the really good trap cards and also having the ability to easily get rid of some of your opponent's cards while protecting your own monsters. It's pretty decent. Then we have 1 copy of Splendid Rose, because it's a plant monster and we play a plant deck. I've never really played that card before, but the time will come where it's important, trust me. Then we have 2 copies of Perialis, Empress of Blossoms. She gains 400 attack points for every plant monster on the field except herself. So she can be a pretty good beatstick with Aroma Garden and Aromaseraphy Rosemary out. Or even without them, she can be pretty huge. The main reason is its once per turn effect though, where you can once per turn special summon 1 level 5 or higher plant monster from your hand or graveyard. So if you have any of the synchros I just mentioned in the graveyard or Bergamot, Ingunar and so on, you can easily bring them back in defense position. The good thing is that the effects of the special summon monsters aren't negated, so you can be used to extend your plays even more. Then we have the game finisher, 2 copies of Ancient Sacred Wyvern. What he does is quite simple, he hits really hard. If your life points are higher than your opponent's, this card gains attack points equal to the difference. So this guy can be pretty huge. But on the contrary, if your life points are lower, then he loses attack points to the difference. So only bring him out when you are in the lead and about to finish the game. You can only special summon this card with the tuner Angelica, since he needs a light tuner monster for his summon, which only Angelica is. Or maybe using Jasmine as tuner with the effect of Laurel would be another weird option to do so. We also play 1 copy of High Speed Roid Chambara. If you don't have the opportunity to go into Sacred Wyvern, you can always go into this guy as well. Since the effect of Aroma Garden affects every monster, this guy can hit really hard as well. When attacking, he gets 200 attack points. So with the attack boost of Garden, he'll be on 2700 on his first attack. He can attack twice, which means his second attack would hit with 2900 attack, which is pretty strong for a level 5 synchro. And at last we play 1 Xyz monster. The Xyz monster Kansashi, the Rikka Queen, which is a level 6 monster and can be easily brought out by using the effect from Ingunar to special summon Bergamot. Its effect allows you to special summon any monster in evil player's graveyard by detaching 1 Xyz material when a plant monster got tributed. The link 2 monster Jasmine, for example, tributes for its effect a special summon from deck, which would lead into another monster from any graveyard. Also, when Lonefire Blossom tributes herself, that also counts. She also has the effect when a plant monster would be destroyed by card effect, you can tribute one plant monster instead to protect them, which is a pretty good effect since it allows you to protect all of your plants and also leads into being able to use the first effect of Kanzashi. So you basically tribute one monster to save your monsters and then special summon another monster from the graveyard. By the way, the monster which gets special summoned by this effect is always treated as a plant monster and the effects are negated. So that was the deck profile of my AROMAGE deck. I really hope you enjoyed it and be hyped about some other deck profiles in the future. Since I'm using my IRL decks for this format, there's currently a limit of how much and which ones I can actually do. So let me know in the comments below what you want to see next. Next you're going to see some gameplay of the deck and at last the full deck list again showing in Edo Pro. See you in the next YouTube video.